interesting line of questions because it hit on some things that I want to discuss. And Ms. Thomas, since you're up, we'll just continue here. On your website, it says that your organization supports national firearms registration that includes name, address, other identifying information about the owner of a firearm, names of the manufacturer, importer, model, type of action, caliber, gauge. You get the picture. You also like to require renewals of registrations annually, including submitting to a background check. Is this correct? It's off your website.
One of the many policy solutions that we think would go a long way to helping reduce gun violence would be registration.
Okay, so that's a yes. I'm just asking for yes or no.
It is one of the many comprehensive laws that we think needs to be in place if we're going to make progress in reducing gun violence in America.
And your organization, as you've already stated, is a very active supporter of H.R. 8. But do you realize that H.R. 8 explicitly states that nothing in this act or any amendment made by this act shall be construed to authorize the establishment directly or indirectly of a national firearms registry? In fact, it goes out of its way to say it doesn't create a firearms registry. How do you square this position calling for a registry with a bill explicitly saying it doesn't?
That is absolutely what H.R. 8 says, and we firmly support everything included in H.R. 8. When we go to our website includes the most comprehensive source of analysis of every gun law in every state and at the federal level, both in existence and what is possible in a world where we might want to very comprehensively regulate guns, as they do in many other countries. So what's on our website refers to all of the possible policy options that this body and state governments can consider when they're looking at opportunities to regulate guns and reduce gun violence.
I think it's really interesting because it's been reported, even under the previous Department of Justice Obama administration, that there's no way to actually regulate private sales. Let's talk about what we're actually talking about here. This is private sales, okay? Not when you go to a federal licensed firearm dealer. This is private sales is what is wanted to be regulated. That needs a registry because you can't keep up with it without a registry. And this goes back to my opening statement when I said, I'm not sure which is crueler, to actually tell people who come to this hearing to say we're fixing your problem and then offer something that it doesn't fix. The question here, because it guts itself inside the bill. You also mentioned red flag laws, which I share a concern here. But the interesting thing is on the red flag, H.R. 8 itself actually prohibits, like if I was this morning to get up and I've had a bad night, let's say whatever, and I just said, I don't want to live anymore, and I'm going, H.R. 8 actually would criminalize if I went across the street to my neighbor and said, I'm having a bad day, I want to make sure I don't have anything to hurt myself or my family, and give those guns to my neighbor. It actually would criminalize that. It's not in the listed exceptions, and I know there's a lot of it, but if you read the bill, it's not there. So again, I think what we've got to do is look at what is honestly being discussed here. I'm going to switch to Chief Acevedo. Chief, it's good to see you again. We had a great time in Houston. Doing something now, and you brought that up, and I think it's an issue. You know my father's in law enforcement, and I think doing something now is a commendable thing if it actually works, if it actually fits. How can you explain what we just said, and going off this last conversation, can you explain how H.R. 8 can operate effectively without a firearms registry, and do you see implementation problems in this?
Well, I think that the recommendations that H.R. 8 has in there, the legislation, will not solve, will not eliminate gun violence, but it'll certainly, I don't think anyone in this panel would say that it wouldn't prevent at least one death. And the question I would have is, passing, if that one death was your child, your mother, your father, is a little inconvenience too much to save that life? And if the answer is no, then there's nothing I can say that's going to change your mind on H.R. 8, but I believe that the legislation will save at least one life. And if it's my child who dies, I want him to know, and I want God to know, that I was here today speaking on that life.
And I think the interesting thing is how many, though, again, in a law that you passed, that you give people comfort in saying that would actually pass, can simply say the transfer was made before this without a registry? And I think this is an interesting thing to actually explore here. We're going to explore this more when I'm sure it is marked up. I'm not questioning by any means the decision or the desire to find a solution to this. This is it. I was I'm still in the military. I was in Iraq. I had the trauma surgeons in Iraq. We talked about this extensively. You know, this is not an issue, but let's also look at this holistically, because every time we want to go to fix this, we go to the population that is the legal gun owners buying or selling in the legal format. We go to BOP, the Bureau of Prisons, when they put out their statistics. Most criminals do not get their, as you well know, do not get their guns from legal sources. They don't. The question is interesting, curious, because this has come up a little bit. My time is running out, but an interesting discussion here is what would be the penalty for robbing a federally licensed firearm or dealer? What should it be and how should it be enforced? Because that's becoming more and more of an issue.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The witness may answer the question.
I believe that this has to be a two-prong approach. We need to take folks that would commit gun violence, steal firearms. We need to have a zero tolerance and a real tough approach on that. The other thing that we need to look at is to have these gun dealers actually have to lock their firearms every night. One of the number one targets of gang members and other criminals is pawn shops and places and gun shops where they come in and burglarize those places. So I think there's a way to do it. And I think the other thing we need to do is to have Congress actually authorize and fund studying a comprehensive study on this matter once and for all, and let the experts come up with the policy decisions on an evidence-based, which is really interesting because you're from George Mason University. Pardon me? And I'm actually in the evidence-based Hall of Fame there. So I really believe that we need to study it, we need to fund it, and lastly, we need to get ATF some help. They're a great partner, but they truly are, because of lack of funding and support of the Congress, operate with one hand behind their backs, or one arm behind their backs. We need to give them both arms.
Thank you.